Ladies and gentlemen, on this episode, you get to see a behind-the-scenes look into what it's like being on the Tommy G team. We speak with Miguel, Keegan, and myself, and we go through crazy moments that we encounter in New York, including going to the projects, going to the craziest Jewish celebration on earth, and going to the Diamond District. So stay tuned and enjoy. All right, ladies and gentlemen. This is a behind-the-scenes type of podcast. This is the team. This is Miguel. This is Keegan. This is the Tres Amigos that travel to every city, pull off the crazy videos. And so we just got back from New York, and I just want to, we're going to have a team talk about what we experienced, because we experienced an awful lot in these 5 days. So we went to a Jewish holiday called Purim that was insane. Went to a drill rapper projects in New York. We went to the Diamond District and got Rolexes on the wrist. We spoke with the ex-con who was a teenage drug lord and is now running businesses the proper way. We did graffiti in the Freedom Tunnel in New York. Almost got caught by the fire department. And then we interviewed a bunch of different interesting people. And so I'll leave it up to the team. Of the videos we did, is there anyone that, or any place we should start that really stands out to you guys?
Purim.
Okay.
Crazy.
So, to give people background, Purim is a Jewish holiday in which they were all supposed to be exterminated by a bad man named Haman, and Queen Esther saved all of their asses, and they did not get exterminated. And so it's an eat, drink, and be merry festival where you might even catch the rabbi out in the streets getting drunk. What did you guys notice? What did you guys observe about the Jewish folks?
I was just really impressed by the hospitality. It's the three of us, and we kind of have a lead in there with Yosef, who, was awesome. But, we didn't have any direct houses to go into. And so he's just like, oh, let's, walk around. And we ended up getting invited, and it was, just a cool kind of zigzagging quest across Crown Heights, getting invited into different people's homes and seeing the individual little flavor of the family.
Being allowed into these multi-million-dollar homes, knowing nobody, and rolling camera as we walk in, and then eating all of their good food was a pretty remarkable experience. Did it surprise you, Miguel?
Yeah, I thought that we were going to maybe be on the street, get in a house, and kind of just talk to a few people. I didn't think we were going to go into countless houses and get a bunch of food, people shoving it down my throat, giving shots. They're like, oh, so it was very different, and yeah, man.
For such a conservative culture, you don't really expect there to be teenagers drunk or just such an open alcohol policy, but it was definitely one of those let our hair down and let's put our dancing shoes on.
Oh, yeah.
What about the separation of men and women? What about, let's talk a little bit more about that. What do you guys think?
I mean, I tried to shake a lady's hand, right? And she's just like, with my heart, I greet you. And it's, I respect it and whatnot, but I think, I don't know, it's healthy, but also, I don't know how I feel about it. I can go either way, but I think you should be able to shake someone's hand. You know what I mean?
To give some background, so we would go to the synagogue and the men would be dancing on the main floor, and then the women had their own kind of party going on upstairs. Some of the houses we went to, the genders were mixed, but other houses there was men on one side, females on the other. And we even learned that a woman is symbolically or spiritually unclean for 2 weeks out of the month as she's around her menstruation time. And in that time, they sleep in separate beds. They cannot hug. And a big reason they do that is that it actually breeds closeness and intimacy, because you're constantly wanting your wife. You're going through periods of having her and then not having her, and that's what keeps the marriages spicy and not stale. That was one of the points one of the women made.
Yeah, it was just interesting to see just, how, you don't see that in, I guess, just, Christian American culture, just how distinctly separated it was compared to, what we're used to.
It made me think that even though the Jews would not be happy with me saying this, but they're much closer to their Muslim brothers in some ways than I would have expected. The way that men and women are separated, and all the, oh, you're symbolically unclean. They had a lot more in common with Middle Eastern folks than I would have imagined. And like Miguel was saying, I definitely see there's a lot of smart moves they make that help protect themselves. Like we were talking to one of the Jewish kids on the porch, and he's like, yeah, teenage pregnancy is almost unheard of in this community. And if you want to escape poverty, like one of the boxes you have to check is not being a teen mom. And so just by the way that they guard their hearts and put boundaries around being physical with other sex, they have a lot of long-term success.
Yeah. I think it also keeps that marriage fresh in a way. Like, say, like, you're always, doing shit with your significant other. And if you kind of, add some fluff to that, it'll keep that marriage more strong.
Because it feels like brand new punani every 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts on our Jewish friends?
I just really had a good time there.
It was
amazing.
One of the most fun videos we got to shoot. The hospitality was off the wall. We also got to bump into one of the most famous Chabad, which is a kind of a Jewish section, kind of like Protestant or Catholic. It's the Chabad Jews. We got to bump into one of the most famous singers in that religion, and we were having a ball of a time.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so we have 4 remaining videos to cover. Drill rapper, Diamond District, inmate, and graffiti. Where do we want to go next, fellas? And remember, storytelling is key, so anything that comes to mind that was vivid, remember that.
Graffiti for sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so walk us through that experience a little bit, Miguel.
Okay, so 7 a.m.? Or actually, I woke up as Tom was telling me 10 minutes, Miguel. I grab everything, throw everything in my camera bag, and I jump downstairs. We get, where is it, like 47th Street?
72nd,
Oh, sure.
and so right downtown in Manhattan, beautiful, rich people all around.
Yeah, and then we meet up with Bush Camp, and he's like,
What was the first speech he told us? Turn the camera off, and then he told us what?
Though, right?
We can say it.
It's like, I want you to know, what did he say? I want you to know 2 things about me. He's like, I'm all connected all over New York, and I'm one of the most dangerous people in the world.
Which is a pretty braggadocious thing to say.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind that there's people like El Chapo and Vladimir Putin walking around, for him to make the claim that I think he said he's the most dangerous man in the world.
Yes.
And it was just like, all right, we get it, man. And then he said that he's behind 10 murders. It's like,
I think he was laying down the ground where he was just saying, hey, I don't want to be fucked with. Don't mess with me. I don't want to play any games.
Yes. And then we go into a dark tunnel with this man.
Yeah.
And what happened next?
Well, it was odd because we were basically sneaking around this jogger park, right by the Hudson River, so we can see, beautiful shot across the river. New Jersey skyline, and there's joggers all over. We're kind of like almost in a parkour sort of space, and he's like leading us towards these fences that have all this construction equipment there, and it was a bit sketchy. I was like, it's pretty black and white. We're trespassing. We're not going where we're supposed to be going, which it's part of the gig. But there were these gators rolling by, with police officers in them, or just security professionals, and so we had to kind of wait out and do some pull-ups, act like we weren't up to no good, and wait for them to roll by before we rushed into this little construction site and
squeeze through a
fence.
gate.
Yeah. So that was a good tone setter. Like, hey, we've got to hop a fence to even get into this tunnel.
Once we were in, it felt like we were back in high school, at least to me.
yeah.
We're like, because I spent a lot of my middle school and high school days like sneaking around, hopping into forts, catching snapping turtles, lighting bottle rockets off at 2 a.m. I remember a time where we really wanted to wake. It was another triplet. So I'm a triplet, and there was another triplet band that the 2 brothers would beef with me and my brother, and like we'd each light fireworks outside each other's house. And I thought I designed like the most crazy firework structure. I had like a shoebox that I poked all these holes in, and it was supposed to like all go off at once and just go kaboom, but it failed. But anyways, it felt like that. Like it felt like, ooh, we're like kind of sneaking out. like mom doesn't know where we are, and we're here to go do graffiti with a guy that had just 15 minutes ago kind of made it clear that if he needed to get rid of us, him and his criminal organization could easily do it. So we get into the tunnel. Describe the emotions running through you. Describe what we're seeing and what we end up doing.
I mean, right off the bat, I felt pretty scared a little bit. And then, I mean, Bushcamp knew what he was doing, so he's, propping open doors and things like that. So that made me kind of calm down a little bit.
Describe what he was doing with the doors and how the two tunnels were different.
Basically, so with each door, he'd get a little rock and just prop it in each little door. And what do you mean by the two tunnels?
One tunnel had an active train running through it, and we needed to be aware of that because if the train came, we wanted to make sure that the door was propped open so we had an escape route to get into the other tunnel. And we wanted to stay in the train side because it was more quiet and undercover versus when we were on the other side of the tunnel, you could kind of hear commotion. So like we were separated by a wall. Apparently Trump owned a lot of properties there, and there was like a parking garage. And so we just wanted to move more undercover, which meant having to think and always like look back to see if a train was coming and know where our exits were.
Yeah, that was kind of freaky because at first I thought like he was going to take us like through like different passages. Like it was almost going to be like when we were underground in Las Vegas.
More of a maze.
Yeah, it was like we've got to go through this door and then, open this hatch. Like I felt thankful that it was just two sides of essentially the same tunnel.
Because we could have gotten out if we needed to.
Exactly. But that I don't feel like he mentioned that there was an active train running through it for the first probably 15, 20 minutes until, we realized, because I was under the impression that it was an abandoned rail line and we were just kind of going through this, older area. And, that really added some suspense to the journey more or less.
What was fun to me was I checked out his Instagram. I knew what his art looked like. And then to see his graffiti everywhere in the tunnel, I'm like, okay, this guy has been there. He's done that. He's legit. Because one of the biggest things we face in our videos is if we have a shitty contact, it's very scary and it's a big waste of time. And sometimes it can get really dangerous. But to see like, oh, there's him, there's him, there's him. It's like, okay, well, he's definitely not bluffing that he's been down here scores and scores of times.
Absolutely.
So he sets up shop, he starts painting, and then some commotion happens. Who would like to talk about the commotion?
So this whole time we were there, there was this like underground parking garage that was behind the wall that we could hear rumbling, we could hear toilets flushing, we could hear, it just sounded like, hatches opening and closing. And we kind of, just brushed it off like, oh, it's just maintenance people working. And all of a sudden we hear this loud just creaking. It was like it just sounded like an old, like a rusty
man.
Yeah, old rusty man. Like an old rusty like door just opening, which that's what it was. And all of a sudden one head pops out, 2, 3, and soon it's a whole, little squad, and it's the fire department of New York doing an inspection on the tunnel. And at first, my thoughts went back to, the Mexican police kicking the door in. Thankfully, the fire department doesn't carry guns and, was pointing it at us. And I was thinking these guys are going to chase us down, or they're just going to immediately call the cops on us once they got there.
They were pretty cool. They let us go. We just had to get out there and come back. We came back. We met another gentleman named Billy. We ate $25 pastrami sandwiches, which I don't know how people survive in New York. I still don't get it. When people are paying $6, $7, $8 a month for rent, and then you see $25 bullshit ass sandwiches. I mean, it was good sandwich, but bullshit for $25.
Oh yeah.
I know Miguel wants to move to New York. Do you still want to after you saw the prices, the traffic, the dirt, the grime?
I love New York more than anything. So, yeah, man, I want to move there one day. I think that day is not, soon. Mm-hmm. I think in the far, far future, I'll be there at least a year. Not even, I just want to experience it, right? But
you just think it's a city to go cut your teeth.
Yeah, just check it out. See, take a risk and go out there. But yeah, I'd still stay out there. What about you'd never go out there?
It's going to be, we're visited a couple times a year. have a good time while we're there, but no thank you for me. I want a yard. They don't even have yards in New York. Like, you could literally be a billionaire and still not have a yard. And what's the point of being like Jeff Bezos if you have not even 1 square foot of green grass that you can take yourself out and let your dog out? Like, how do people even own a dog in New York where they have nowhere to go? They just run around the apartment until they go crazy?
Well, there's dog parks too.
I mean, okay, but that's one. Like, I guess if you have to take your dog twice a day to the dog park for them to be like a well-balanced dog, otherwise, it's gonna be like a city dog that doesn't know how to act. I feel like.
Yeah.
Is there anything that we learned from bush camp that stood out to you?
I think it's really cool whenever you have somebody who's just gone really deep in an area that you know nothing about. Like, he's gone so deep in that graffiti scene, and same with Billy. Like, he had investigated it a ton. He knew a ton about it. He'd taken a ton of pictures of it, and so it's just cool to like hear somebody kind of riff or talk about something that they know everything about and you know nothing about.
It's interesting to me because, like, when you look at the ladder of success and progress that never stops going up, there's a million things you can focus on. Like, you can be Mike Tyson and become the best boxer. When graffiti artists do the same exact tag, but like slightly different color or maybe some different variations, it is interesting. To me, it would get a little bit boring to do the same, like, Tommy on every wall multiple times. But I guess in some ways that's part of the pursuit, is like, to us it looks simple, but I even tagged a tiny bit on the wall and it was terrible. I mean, it looked like some of the stuff I'm trying to say these days, I have to like speech check myself. I'm going to say it. I looked retarded when I did this. Okay. And so I guess in a way, what looks simple or like repetitive to us is still a really tough thing to chase for people. So we spent some time in the projects.
Oh yeah.
The Eastchester Gardens, boy, where there's drill rappers running around in shiesties. There's apparently an active war. We went from the Diamond District to the projects, and as we were leaving the Diamond District, we told them where we were going, and they're like, there's an active war going on there. Like, what are you guys doing? And we went there. First impressions and things you noticed, fellas.
It was really interesting when we were going from, the height of Manhattan to the Bronx, and we were driving, and you can just see it in the architecture. You can see it in the signs. You see it where you go from, seeing all these like Gucci ads or Chanel ads, all these like luxury items, or, new apartment for rent, and it's overlooking Central Park. And
Vegan breast milk for sale.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like glitz and glamour.
Yeah.
And, it's starting to get more run down as we head there, and you can see, all of a sudden you're seeing where it's like $10,000 reward for information regarding cop shot last week.
Oh, yeah.
And
have you ever seen a billboard like that before?
Never.
I feel like I've seen a few around Milwaukee. I don't think it was for like a cop specifically, but it was like for a word leading to arrest.
You're in a bad neighborhood when you see offers like that on the billboards.
Yeah.
So what were your observations in this drill rapper scene? Was it is it an appealing life? Yeah. Have any sort of regret that you're not a drill rapper?
I mean, I think they need
Keep going.
I think that these rappers need more influence to do, better actions. They need to surround themselves with different people than the people that they grew up around, because you're the sum of the 5 people that you're around, right? So,
well, here's what was absolutely remarkable to me is their lack of references in the world. Like, their world was their one little square block, and it was smoking weed, and it was rapping. Like, I guess, like, are there field trips in this area? Did their parents ever think, hey, we're going to go over here for a day? Like, it's almost like these kids have never been out of their block. And it's not their fault. I mean, when you don't have if you don't have a car and you're just a kid, and I guess you're in a dangerous area, so like their parents are probably like, hey, stick close to home. It was just hard to wrap my head around how small their world was.
Yeah. No, that was interesting. Like, just hanging out on the playground with him, I was like, is this it? Like, are we not going to go for a bike ride, or go for even a walk around the block?
It just was a boring sit around and do nothing style of life for a lot of the people we met.
Mm-hmm.
But on the other end, they're making these highly charged, high energy, violent songs. And like you watch a video and you would think their life is like, holy shit. Like it's like John Wick every single day. They're just like running around, dodging bullets, getting into shootouts, and then like going to designer clothes areas and balling. But like there was such a, I don't want to say like you got to be paranoid to be one of those kids, but I guess if you're actively talking shit all the time to other kids that are also actively talking shit all the time, and there's stabbings, there's shootings. Like when we were on the phone getting to the studio, he had to double check. Like, are you sure there's no one else in the studio? No one else in the drill scene in the studio? Because it's that treacherous that if they even meet up, someone's going to get hurt. And that would be such a stressful and uncomfortable lifestyle to live.
Yeah. Do you think, like, it's kind of like a chicken or the egg? Do you think a lot of the beef comes from the songs, or do you think a lot of the songs are about the beef? Like, which one do you think it is most of the time that precedes the other one?
It's almost like, did the Big Bang start the world? Like, I don't know. Like, I'm trying to figure out how to answer that question. I think the big part of their rapping is talking shit, and it almost is like beef is good for business. Mm-hmm. If they have no enemy, no one listens to the song almost. Like, if you're not talking shit about, like, they made a song. I saw that there was one of the, I think it was Didi Osama's brother got stabbed to death, and then they made a song about it, and like one of the dance moves is like mimicking a stab.
Jeez.
And that went viral on TikTok, and now you're dissing someone's dead homie, blah, 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 and it just perpetuates. And it's weird that, like, on one end, what's going to get them out of the hood and make them rich is the same thing that might kill them early. It's a high-risk, high-reward game that they're in.
Yeah, I definitely think that the beef starts within. Like, another drill rapper set the trend. He just dropped another song, beefing towards C Blue, another drill rapper. And basically what happened is C Blue, or set the trend, blew up C Blue, and then he kind of just like left him. You know what I mean?
They used to be buddies.
Yeah, he blew up. He pretty much left him, set the trend, put him on to
Shaji's blew up, left C Blue.
No, set the trend. Set the trend.
That's the guy's name.
Yeah.
I thought I thought it was that. You're telling. Okay, I got you now.
And yeah, so he pretty much blew up his friend, and then he just dropped another song, pretty much dissing C Blue. So it's kind of like something happens, and then they just, they put their emotion into their music.
It's interesting too because I think this is just with the younger kids, but like even the cliques that were a little bit older, like the Izzy 93 clique or the Little Cricks clique, there was a lot of, it's all about love and loyalty here, and you could tell they had each other's back. Mm-hmm. But it seems like in those younger drill crews, like the slightest infraction can make a departure from the crew, and then all of a sudden, people that you were just hanging out with, puffing weed on the playground, littering on the playground with, all of a sudden that's the guy that you're going to rap about in the next song, and you guys might kill each other. There was a moment that probably won't be in the documentary that we put on YouTube, but it involves a moped. Would anyone like to talk further on this?
Yeah, I heard this noise in the distance where, it was just, you can tell it's a moped, obviously, but like it's getting louder and louder. Like, we're in the middle of, what was it, 4 or 5 those, higher rise garden buildings, and it's echoing off of it as it gets closer, and it's buzzing straight towards us. This guy who's on a moped, and
with a shiesty.
Yeah, he's wearing a shiesty, and when we were just back in the Diamond District, the same guy who had brought up the war, after that he said, these kids, they'll spin each other's blocks in bikes, where, they'll ride through each other's projects on bikes. And so my mind immediately went through that, ride through each other's projects on bikes and, shoot each other, basically. And so I was immediately thinking, like, crap, this guy's, he's strapped and he's going to unload as soon as he drives past us. Luckily, he just zipped right past, and
it seemed like it was a little bit of a joke. Like he was kind of tricking his buddies a little bit,
Yeah, he was like buzzing the tower,
trying to get a reaction out of them. And the rappers were keen on us, like they wanted us to delete that footage. And I thought that footage was actually very valuable because it's like, well, I think this shows the danger that you're in. Like if you have to worry about a random kid coming by you on a bike or a moped, I think that's something that would be worth people knowing, like what kind of situation you're living in. The other thing that really stood out to me about New York is it's the only city that I feel like the police force was feared and respected. Mm-hmm. Everywhere else, they're like openly like they got to do their jobs, like they don't do shit, like we're out here kind of a thing. And here it was a lot more like, yeah, if we do something wrong, we'll be put into the police van, they'll beat the shit out of us and then let us out. So it seems like the New York police have a very heavy-handed approach, which on one end makes things safer, but on the other end, you don't want to give too much power to the police to just freely beat the shit out of kids. What are your guys' thoughts on the NYPD?
I agree too. I think that they're talking about them in a way that, you know, like Shah and his crew, they were all scared of the cops too. And, you know, they're not saying fuck the police. They're like, oh God, like we're scared to see those guys. And you never see that with any other, you know, gangster rappers. So.
Yeah, that was wild. And you see the videos in Milwaukee of kids like just running away from the police.
And laughing. Like all the latest police chase videos, there's been like an influx of like 3 or 4 recently where it's like the police is chasing after someone and like falls over. Or there's like a bunch of police converging and like the people filming are even like you better not do shit, like, or like cheering the guy that's running on. Like it's almost like one big game, one big, oh, they're here. It's an entertainment thing that we're just going to catch on our phone and post up for the Instagram channels to check out. And in New York, it was, I mean, I don't know. I'm not the best at seeing who's carrying a gun or not, but I didn't get the impression really anyone in that crew had a gun on them.
No, I feel like if they did, they would have brought it out at some point.
And flashed it and been cool about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seemed like that was a place that they knew the penalty was so strong that they didn't, which I don't know if we dive into policing in America. That's probably a topic for another time because anything that you bring up, it doesn't matter if it's about abortion or illegal immigration or policing, there's a pro and con to every idea you propose. And so while I see the utility of the police being feared, they also have done a lot of things that were unconstitutional in New York. There was an era of the stop and frisk phase where police could just stop you at any time, feel up your body. You didn't like what we have in this country is you need to have probable cause.
Yeah.
And New York somehow did away with probable cause. And like when we talked to one of these guys, Cos Marte, who's doing phenomenal and a phenomenal entrepreneur, but he said in maybe a year period, he may have gotten stopped and frisked 300 times. Yeah. Which is bullshit. I mean, on one end, like if you're a law-abiding citizen, like the argument is you have nothing to worry about, so who cares? But on the other end, a police force that can do that is kind of scary. Thoughts?
Yeah, like when he was talking about that, like 300 times in 1 year, it was kind of like, well, they were kind of on your case that it was, you know, you were
actively
dope
drug dealing at the time.
Yeah.
But even a drug dealer, should they have probable cause for that to happen to them?
True. Yeah, I guess. I mean, like, you know, innocent until proven guilty. They didn't have a case where he had been convicted yet. Or at least he had served his time previously for his convictions. So you could argue he didn't deserve to, you know, get frisked right then and there.
Mm-hmm. So, like, part of me really says, like, man, that's a huge violation, and I don't want that to ever happen to somebody. The other part of me is picturing, like, what if you were that guy's next door neighbor? Every time you get stopped and frisked, you'd be like, fuck, yeah, I hope they find something, because this guy has been, like, the traffic around my block, the guns around my block, the people that are coming in and out. Everything is yin and yang. Mm-hmm. So, okay. Let's talk a little bit about the Diamond District. We met a very interesting character, an entrepreneur by the name of Trax NYC, who runs probably the most notable diamond custom bling business. I mean, while we were there, somehow I was allowed to wear Busta Rhymes chain. Sorry, Busta. Hope you don't get upset with me. We saw bling meant for Kodak Black. We saw bling meant for Mr. Beast, Logan Paul. This guy was moving and shaking in the rapper, influencer, celebrity bling space. First thoughts and impressions or descriptions of Trax?
I feel like he's exactly what I thought he was going to be. You know, he's just a boss, kind of, you know, the way he'd boss around his employees and whatnot. It's exactly what I saw and what I imagined him being, seeing how big his business is.
What about how much goes on behind the scenes of the diamond business and maybe the not so glamorous elements of it?
Yeah, that was wild to see, because like on the surface level, or when you walk in, you would see, you know, the bling, you'd see the guys in, you know, the custom suits who are actually like selling it and interacting with customers. And I felt like as you walked back, like it's not like it's bad, but it's just, you know, less aesthetically pleasing. You know, you went from this super fancy showroom to, you know, when we were in the sales office, you know, there's guys who are just working away. And it was a cool sales office, but, you know, it wasn't as glamorous as down there. And then when we went further back, you know, into where they manufacture it and package it and polish it, there you're like, you see the grittier side of the business. You know, the guys who 8 hours a day, they're leaning over, polishing. And one part of me was like, my initial reaction was like, wow, this, you know, is like crazy conditions to work in. But, you know, when he was talking about kind of how their, you know, the thought process of that person, where that, you know, master polisher of the jewelry, that's kind of what they want to do. Like they want to do their craft that they've excelled at, which is whether it's polishing or assembling. And he kind of curated that environment for their specific skill set, which is, you know, they want to just work on polishing that jewelry or assembling it in that, you know, environment. And that's what they were excellent at.
What it revealed to me is like the truth behind the world is that there's always the people doing the heavy lifting that are kind of out of sight that we don't really appreciate. Like even when you get your brand new Tesla, there was a guy in the factory who his job is 8 hours a day. He's spray painting doors that come by, and he might spray paint 200, 300 doors a day. And he has a big mask, and he might get fumes. And like, there's a lot of people behind the scene that make things feel great. But when you realize like the back-breaking labor, like even a Airbnb, like you stop into a poppin' Airbnb, but there was probably some lady or some sort of cleaning crew that was bending over, changing the sheets. You know, the last party that was there made a huge mess, and they're the ones that have to clean it up so that when you go in there, you experience something nice. And I guess the world goes around because of these people, and we owe them a great deal of respect. And almost makes me want to do like Dirty Job style episodes where you can really appreciate the people that build this country, make this country go around, because there's a lot of hardworking people, and they rarely get the credit of than the guy that's in the front. That what I'm trying to say is they rarely get the credit. They're not the front page news. They're not the guy that's on the thumbnail. They're the behind the scenes person that makes things run.
Yeah, I just saw a video. I forget her name. She keeps doing the, you know, the I tried challenges. Like I was showing you, she just did I tried garbage disposal. So yeah, so basically she's just, you know, putting on for all those people, and she did like an 8-hour shift, you know, that whole thing, and it'd be really cool to do something like that.
Yeah, and to think we just have this, I don't know if it's entitlement or we have this kind of comfortability that the system has been working so well for so long that we just assume like, oh yeah, I just take my garbage out and someone's going to take care of it, but it's not going to be me. But there's a guy that supports his entire family by being the garbage man. And I think it's just important to really value all sorts of folks. Like you don't have to be Mr. the rapper or the glamorous, like the model. Like there's certain jobs we put on a pedestal, but I think we can live without the models. You know, we can live without a lot of the rappers, but we cannot live without the people that are really doing the dirty work in this country. Let's see. I think it was interesting, the not lack of security, but it wasn't as the type of security that I pictured. It was more so there was the Diamond District is kind of a row of businesses in New York, and then behind in all of them and in nooks and crannies within the building, there's the emerald guys, there's the sapphire guys, and there's millions and millions of dollars of gems. I mean, 95% of the world's diamonds travel through the diamond district in New York. So there might even be hundreds of millions, maybe even billions of diamonds and sapphires and precious stones that are circulating through this place. But it's not like there's armed ex-Navy SEALs or mercenary type guys. I think it's enough of a labyrinth that they don't even really need it. They do their business kind of undercover, where they can just be in their home office doing what they have to do without much security. What did you guys think about that?
Yeah, I thought it was interesting, the line that he said where I think it was, the greatest security that we have is secrecy. Like the guys who ran the Green Gems shop, they said, nobody's allowed to do business in here unless we know exactly who it is. And so it seemed, just kind of like a vestige of that old-fashioned business ethic of, this person, we're going to get an introduction. And it seemed like it was really built on trust rather than like having to enforce things through contracts or through security or through, just different, conventional methods that we think of nowadays as security or loss prevention.
I think we've almost been convinced, just because from exposure, that money is really loud. There's the rappers that are all in your face with it. There's entertainers. There's the athletes. There's the famous businessmen that we know of. But true wealth is like the way that they dress is under the radar. The way that they operate is under the radar. And I think it's interesting to see like the real money makers here aren't the people that are like, hey, yo, what's up? I got 40 on my neck. Like they're just wearing their little sweaters and making millions of dollars without anyone knowing about it. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, moving on to, we can either talk about some of the podcast guests, or we can also talk about Cos Marte, the ex-con, where he runs a gym where people visit, and it's ran by an ex-con. So there's a guy that may have served 10 years for armed robbery telling you to do your push-ups, telling you to do your sit-ups, and it was a really fun environment. But of the remaining things on the list, is there anything that really stands out to you?
I thought it was just cool how he really turned his life around. He went from being a guy who, was slinging drugs to, kind of the, obviously hitting rock bottom, you could argue, by going to jail and being overweight. And then, really turning his life around and becoming an example of an American success story by becoming better physically and financially, and allowing, being able to uplift those people by providing them a meaningful employment and an opportunity to not go back to prison. Like he said, he had a 0 recidivism rate, which I thought was
out
amazing.
of about 80 employees that he had brought on from the system, which is incredible, because I think, what did he say, the average recidivism rate is like 33% or 50% or something extremely high.
I thought he said it's 70% recidivism, if 70% recidivism overall, and I think he said 30% if somebody gets a job. But he had no recidivism.
I think that what that really highlights is, and I think this is especially with men, and maybe the women can correct me here, but we need purpose and we need meaning, and we kind of need something that we can focus on and drive towards. And I think him giving guys outlets to be like, to go from when you're freshly getting out, even getting a job is a miracle. But now if you have a job that you're actually a leader and you're in charge of helping people with their fitness and you're guiding them through workouts, I think that level of responsibility is very healthy, and also that gives them a strong sense of purpose. So it seems like it's a really cool model too, to see like a guy challenging the idea that like ex-cons are, because they're kind of disregarded or tossed away. It's rare that you see an ex-con with such a success story. And so I really like what he's doing, and it really, I hope with his weed business, like I hope he can hire hundreds and hundreds of guys and really just make a statement and change how things are with ex-cons. Because I know, for instance, when my brother went away for 10 months, when he got out, you're given the clothes that you were arrested in, and it's kind of like, figure it out from here. It's not like, hey, we're going to help you plan your first week. We have a hotel for you to stay at. We have a counselor for you to visit. It just get back into the wild. And it was convenient that he had really good ties with my mom, so my mom could help him out and make sure he was okay. But if he didn't have good family connections, or his family didn't have some resources to help him with, like, what the heck would he have done? Like, it's no wonder people go right back to the thing they know on how to make money. If they're not going to go from job to job to job applying. They don't have a suit to wear. They don't have the resources. Are they going to get a car so they can get to each job application? So it's a big mess, and it's part of a mess that they've created, but also there is an element of they've served, they've paid their price. Society should welcome them back. And it's cool to see a guy really challenging that narrative.
Definitely.
So we had the privilege of having some really interesting people walk up to our Airbnb and interview them. I think let's start with, we got to meet with Al Iaquinta, who is a badass professional fighter. I mean, this guy, the only guy to go 5 rounds with Khabib. He beat some legends, like he beat Jorge Masvidal. He had a tough match with Cerrone. I mean, he's faced legitimate fighting legends and beaten some of them. And at one point was ranked in the top 5 in the world. What was your guys' first impression when that man walked into the building?
Right away when I saw his ears, I'm like, oh, fuck. This guy's the real deal, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I think he was, right away, just super professional.
What do you notice about the demeanor of fighters?
I mean, he definitely seemed like calmly confident, where you can tell if he wanted to, he could have probably beaten the shit out of all of us, potentially simultaneously.
No offense, Al, but I think if I got a hold of you and then these guys did too, I think 3-on-1 I would bet on ourselves, but he would definitely hurt us.
Oh, yeah.
And we wouldn't be able to hurt him nearly as much.
With being somebody that watches fighting, like, what was that like for you, seeing this guy walk in? And
it was just one of those moments where you're like, I felt like a kid in a candy shop. Like, I can't believe this guy is walking in the room to talk to who? To talk to me? Like, why? Why are you even here, man? And so it was surreal. And it was also just very encouraging and exciting to talk to people that are in the community that I love. Like, I love wrestlers. I love the fight community. And I always love, like, the dudes that are truly badass and can kick the shit out of you are always some of the nicest, most respectful. I don't want to say gentle, but, like, very calm and relaxed. And I think that's something that's always a fun thing to contrast to the Chihuahuas of the world.
Oh, yeah.
Chihuahuas are usually pussies. And Al Iaquinta is the opposite of that.
Have you ever come across, like, somebody who's, I guess, kind of a Chihuahua who's, maybe they run their mouth like McGregor or...
There's some of them. I think they're more of, like, the brawler types in that world. And you get personalities of all sorts. Like, some people just love fighting and love talking shit and have that attitude. But I would say overall, the fight community is very humble, hardworking, dedicated, relaxed. And I also, to me, it's a lot of fun too to be able to take time on the podcast to talk about wrestling. Like, it's not every day you can run down memory lane with a guy that's been there in the sport. And it's a sport that I want to share with the world. Like, if I can, because of these episodes or YouTube, people will sign up for jiu-jitsu or wrestling or become an MMA fighter. Like, to me, that's a mission accomplished that I would love to spread that influence. So, let's see. We had, I would say, 2 wild cards we spoke with. JJ Lieberman, wonderful guy, and John Joseph.
Oh, yeah.
One of the best storytellers we've gotten to talk to yet.
Absolutely.
Which of JJ and I guess John Joseph is also a JJ if you break it down. But which of these 2 would you like to cover first?
Let's go JJ.
Okay. Describe him, fellas. What is this man?
Wild. Always talking about, we could say like anything.
Anything.
Yeah. Okay, so I feel like he said titty fucking probably 100 times.
Breast milk was a common one.
Dude, I've never heard, I don't think I've ever heard somebody talk about breast milk outside of the conversation of, like, they're a mother feeding their kid. But this dude was obsessed with breast milk.
So so Reddit pretty much has any category of porn or you could ever hope for. And I typed in breast milk after that experience with JJ. What was really weird about that category was a lot of times it was moms with actual children. Like it was like topless moms with kids. And I know that's not what JJ was saying that he was about.
Yeah.
I guess that's weird, but it would almost be equally as weird if a grown man was also on the tit too, you know?
Yeah.
And I think what JJ made me really think about, and I think he made me blush at one point in the podcast too, because he's like, oh, like what's the thing that you look up that's a little like a little weird or a little like, I think like JJ has the bravery to express himself sexually, which I think we are a rather vanilla. The word he used was puritanical. That like hardcore Christian influence has kept us like in a box. And while I don't think I'm gonna just start ordering escorts to give me breast milk, I guess in some ways, like this goes maybe connects also to the OnlyFans people we were able to meet in Vegas. Like we met a lot of dominatrixes out in Vegas and people that either wanted to be a dominatrix, or we even talked to like a sub where the dominatrix beats the shit out of them, and like they would openly talk about like, yeah, like I'm really into it when she's, you know, punching my ball bag. And it's just like part of me is like, what the hell? And the other part of me is like, like I wonder like if we didn't have the shame and it would just like almost like, okay, for hobbies, when I want to try chess, I want to try flying a kite, I want to try fishing. Like if sex was like that, where you're just like, I don't know if I'm into this. It sounds a little weird, but I'm just going to try it. I don't have to stick out the whole season of baseball. Like I can quit on any day of the practices if I want to. But I wonder like what we would try, and if we were a more liberated culture, like what would become more normal? Or do you think there's just always going to be like these very niche categories that for whatever reason, JJ's into breast milk, but it's like a fraction of the population will ever get into?
I think it could, I mean, we all can try some new stuff, I guess, you know, but I think, you know, do you think anybody really likes breast milk? You know what I mean?
That
like,
dude, you can't tell me that dude didn't like breast milk. He was ready to spend his last $300 on some titty milk.
I don't even like milk, period. But when my wife has some breast milk, I'm for sure trying it. Even if I just like what I was thinking, like even from a health standpoint, I think I would like mix it into like a protein shake. Like it's supposed to be, I mean, the baby's brain needs it. And like, I think we've been kind of sold a lie by the powers that be in the food, the food world, like that formula somehow replaces breast milk.
Yeah.
There's no way that powdered bullshit is better than your mom's tit.
Have you heard about what like Nestle was doing in the Congo?
Tell the people what was going on, Keegan.
Dude, that was like, so Nestle would like, they ran like an ad campaign in the Congo where they would give out a certain supply, I think it was 4 weeks or 5 weeks of free powdered, you know, formula to every single newborn that was, or every single new mom that was having a kid in hospitals.
And was there a reason they chose that specific timeline?
Yes, because like for lack of a better term, you know, the well runs dry after 5 weeks or whatever the time period was. So these kids, you know, wouldn't have a milk source, and, you know, they'd basically have a guaranteed customer lined up. Because
the mom would run dry, so they create the dependency and then create the market.
Yeah, it's like basically like a crack dealer. You know, get the first sample and then you're hooked and you can't live without it.
It's sickening. And like, I wonder when it just feels like on one end, like it is the free market, which is, we had another guest talk about the free market. Should businesses just be able to run buck wild and hook people into bullshit? Like it's technically not illegal to give something away for free for 4 or 5 weeks. And you know how their PR firms are like, oh yeah, we're doing a service to the poor people of the Congo. We're helping them out. We're giving them free. But then on the back end, they're reaping in the profit. So like, it's technically not illegal. It's just wrong. So like, how can you ever get that to stop?
It's a good question.
That might be a stumper for the day.
Oh yeah.
What's your solution to it?
I think if you can show, like for instance, like when a chemical company denies that there's anything wrong with what they're putting into the waste in the surrounding area, but then, you know, a bunch of people in that town develop cancer, I think you just have to go out after them and attack them heavily. Like when a company, hey, you really screwed the moms over in the Congo, like, and you did this Trojan horse move where you put it in under the guise of you're helping, but then you really screw a bunch of people, you're going to be held accountable. And we're not just taking away like the exact numbers that you made from it, but we penalize you even heavily so that we deter that type of nonsense behavior in the future. And I think that's what is done, but it seems like it's rare that those cases are won because you're dealing with these companies like Nestle that have such $1 billion reserves for their lawyers. They're hiring the best of the best. They know how to navigate it. And unless you also have a bottomless well to go after them with, they're just going to drown you out in the proceedings, and they're going to do a mistrial. They're going to do things that make you just not be able to compete with them financially. So maybe there's a way of leveling the playing field where like the underdog still can win in court when these big companies are pulling their bullshit. But I guess this is probably well out of our realms, and maybe one day we'll interview a Supreme Court justice. But back to the other JJ, John Joseph, who for the first 45 minutes of the episode basically just had one of the darkest yet most intriguing and action-filled stories I think I've ever heard a human being speak. Speak to the people. I'm going to go take a quick piss, but let's keep the show running. Describe John Joseph and what he was talking about.
What? He's like 60-year-old dude?
62? Or he's 61, he said.
Yeah. So crazy dude.
Oh, yeah.
One of his crazy stories that stood out to me was probably when he was on a plane with his girlfriend. And basically, he had Coke up in his little, what is it called? Like
carry-on?
The carry-on. And he snorted like half the bag.
Yeah. Well, because the reason that he did it, because he, like, what was it?
It was because, his girlfriend was saying, I think his girlfriend gave like their flight number and everything, all their information to someone that was gonna, I don't know, that could pretty much leak their information and pretty much get them booked. I don't know.
Yeah, like in his mind, he was like, she told him that she had given, the flight information to her friend, and he knew, oh shit, she's gonna call the authorities because in the eyes of that woman's father, he had kidnapped her. Yeah. So we had all these private investigators, all these police officers after him. And he said, well, I'm done for. I'll have one last grand old party, and just ripped through the bag, it sounded like.
The amount of get out of jail free cards this guy had, he had hits. What was the term he used? HOS? No, KOS, kill on sight. Yeah. He had KOS orders issued by Puerto Rican gang members in New York, by Cuban gang members in Miami, and from even when he was a young man all the way through adulthood, like the amount of times that he should have overdosed or he almost got arrested by the Navy, but somehow got out of that and lived with a fake identity for many years, to some of the robberies he pulled on people, to sleeping in abandoned buildings and almost getting caught, or having to have sort of like a turf war with rival gangs. Like, he is lucky. We are lucky that he made it to the interview alive, because that man should have been dead a long time ago.
And like when he was talking about witnessing that murder firsthand, that was insane.
Jog my memory. I know he
was in the bathroom taking a leak.
Oh, yeah.
All of a sudden, this guy walks in with a machete, goes over and stabs the guy next to him who's in the stall, and he's just seeing the guy struggle.
And blood going everywhere.
Oh, yeah. And the guy just walking out and just going, shh. Like, that was just insane to think that, like, he just walked away from a guy who very well could have just ended him.
Yeah. I think like a comparison I made in my mind too is like, you wonder why people turn out the way they do. and then you just hear about their childhood. Like, for example, I was reading a book about Iceberg Slim, a famous pimp in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. And like the opening paragraph is he's getting molested, like a grown woman is using his 3-year-old head against her crotch she was getting off on it. And it's like, even from the first paragraph, I'm like, oh, well, duh. Like, this guy is on his way to becoming a pimp. And then you read about all the abuse that he suffered and his childhood. And it's like, it doesn't excuse the man, but you get it. And then when you hear this guy, like, you know, the earliest memories he has is his dad beating the dog shit out of his mom. How scary is that for a kid? And then, the state rescues him and puts him in foster care. It should be a good life going forward. No. Now he's being fed dog food, not even really allowed to live, doing chores constantly. Like, it's almost like out of a Roald Dahl, like the Twits, or like some book where it's like about like an evil boarding house in England where like the kids just get the shit beat out of them. They have no rights. They're basically servants. And I think it really highlights to me the importance of loving, supporting, having a stable environment for kids. Even go back to the drill rappers. Like, it's always a sensitive thing to ask a kid from the projects, like, what your childhood was like, where's your father? You're really not even allowed to like talk about father. Like, it's almost too sensitive, especially as a white guy. I really can't lead with the dad question because it's too loaded, it's too sensitive. But we can make some probably assumptions, like we didn't meet his dad, and we didn't even hear him be mentioned, but his mom was mentioned. But it's like, well, no duh, this kid is rapping about murdering. Let's hear more about his childhood. And I don't know. It's like at one end, you do have to hold the adult responsible. But on the other end, it's like, well, I didn't get the dog shit beat out of me as a kid. I wasn't eating dog food when I was 8 years old. Like, it just really goes to show how important being a good parent is. And then we had an experience where I felt like I was a little bit out of my weight class with Ryan Long. He was an incredibly smart, witty, very successful stand-up comedian that was also somewhat of a dominant speaker. Like, I'm used to a little bit more back and forth in the conversation. But also I loved listening to him because he just was another level of intellectual. And what did you guys think of Ryan Long? And I guess one thing I know we should be doing is also giving some color commentary. So he's a comedian that grew up in Canada, is very successful in the New York scene, just was on the Joe Rogan show. He's touring. He's got his own podcast. I mean, this man is, he's always marched the beat of his own drum. He's ran TV shows in Canada. He's never really had a real job.
No.
And so it's a man that's like the fruits of his labor are paying off, and he's just taking off in a very fun way. But now let's talk a little bit more about what you learned about Ryan, your thoughts of him.
I thought it was, just impressive, just how funny he could make specific things like in the conversation. I'm failing to come up with a specific, like
the Python pants, maybe you want to talk about,
like the Python pants, just like talking about the old pranks that he would pull. Where he'd bring in a pair of pants that had an enlarged crotch and like pitch them to a CEO.
Just storm into a random. So this is a bit he did. He would storm into a random business, say he had a meeting with the CEO, talk his way somehow into that meeting with the camera rolling and following him, and then prank the CEO in his own office. I mean, it's a really clever, fun prank, but two, it takes a whole lot of balls.
Oh yeah.
Thoughts.
I think going back to like that, the putting, like the art thing that he was saying like our type of like video creation or like anything in art is kind of put on like a higher level than regular jobs. And he's saying how everything else is kind of creative, like a guy at a hedge fund or the garbage disposal people. Like they make their operations and the way they move in a creative way too. And I feel like
he kind of leveled the playing field, saying that there's an art in everything. And we only really give credit in art to like the traditional outlets, like if you're a rapper, if you're a painter, if you're a video creator. But I think the point that he said was really interesting is you might have the most innovative way of investing on Wall Street. That's an art. You might have the most innovative way of teaching a class in kindergarten, but that's still an art. And I did think that was a good point that because it's easy to get down on yourself. Like I've been in a job that I'm like, I just don't think there's purpose or meaning in this. But even in sales, there is an art to like, there's the guy that can go out there and close 50% of the people you talk to. And then there's a guy that's just struggling to even get people on the phone. So I do like that mentality that there is an art form in everything, even the things that we don't typically deem as art.
How was that as an interviewer speaking with him and, you know, kind of more or less having the table turned where you felt out of your league?
Yeah, I think the most of where I felt out of my league was just like the clear times I would be like about to comment on what he was saying or ask a question. I felt like I was steamrolled a little bit, but I think it also is like everything. This is an art, and so like, what could have I done better? And not that it was a bad conversation. I really enjoyed my time with him, and I thought there's a lot of moments that people are going to take away from that episode that are going to be like, wow, like I'm really glad I listened to Ryan Long speak. But I think it's like the art of the interviewer. Like at what point, like with John Joseph, there's a lot of times where you just let him go, and to interrupt that story would have been stupid because he was flowing and you were hearing stuff that you just couldn't believe. So I think it's another reminder to me that like this is another craft to think about and be aware about and be able to look myself in the mirror and be like, hey, this episode I could have done X, Y, Z a little bit better, but knowing it for going forward. I guess what would you have done in my shoes?
I really don't know. I mean, because I have less interview experience than you, obviously, with, you know, the podcast and everything. I thought he was a guy it was fun to just let him riff.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's some people where literally just letting him riff is the best way to go about doing things.
Definitely. Yeah. Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think you pretty much just, it's kind of like alley-oop. Like you kind of like toss the ball up
Yeah.
and, you know, they do the dunk and just go on with their conversation.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I hope is that people aren't like that when they're listening to Ryan, that I don't interrupt the flow. And because that's really like a conversation. I think he even mentioned this with stand-up. It's kind of a hypnosis. And like even when you're in a conversation, you're nodding your head and you're following it. And then well, wait, what? You know, and I stop the flow. That's like the biggest no-no in the business. So we'll see. We'll listen to it. We'll learn. But it is an art. This is an art as well. And to be able to have the magic continue and the rhythm, it's like an orchestra. You want it to flow nicely and then hit a crescendo and then you go off to the next thing. Let's see here.
So like just for the improvement of like the podcast in general, like is there something you've done specifically, or have you just been thinking about the more reps I get in by interviewing people, the better I'll get? Like,
I think that's the only way to get better at anything. The more videos you edit, the better you're going to get. The more deals you close in real estate, the better you're going to get. I think there's no way to be a fighter, but to go to the sparring practice or go to the roll. So I think it's just showing up, being able to be grounded enough to be like, it was good, but I could have done better. And I think just having that mentality all the time, being able to look at every video we put out and be like, it was really good, but like there should always be at least 1 point of improvement.
Like so always have a bone you can chase.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think after everything you do, you should reflect every time. Like I try for every video and be like, okay, I messed up here. I should have cut this part. I should have done this and this. And same for you, I guess, like every interview, you know, you'll reflect and be like, okay, next time I'm going to let them finish their story instead of trying to, you know.
Yeah. And I think that's the only way to be great is to, like, anytime you think your shit don't stink and everything you do is the best and it's the most amazing and you're A+ every single time, I think that's the beginning of the end. That's the downfall.
That's
stage.
literally the worst thing you could do ever. Like you gotta.
And those people are obnoxious.
Yes.
Like talking to people that think they're God are just like, bitch, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah.
Have you always been that way where you've always thought like, oh, this was good, but I could have done this? Or has there been a time that you feel like you felt your shit hasn't stunk? Or
So I think almost all of my coaches from baseball, football, like I remember like hearing like one of the biggest compliments I ever got was like Tommy is the kid that like if I told him to run through a brick wall, he'd do it. I remember like a 10-year-old baseball coach doing that. And to me, like that, I would say most coaches would say I've been very coachable. And I think that just been part of me is, and also I do want to, like, I want an accurate assessment. I want feedback that actually helps, because I am interested. I do care in how people perceive it. I do care in how good I think it is, because I want to be able to put out a piece that, my mother-in-law can watch, and it's like, yeah, I did this. Like, that's a good piece, and I'm happy about it. Or that I can watch it 10 years from now and not be like, God damn it, dude, you sucked. And I think we're putting out such a high volume of content that, well, one, we're becoming better very quickly, but two, like, it's almost like we're moving at such a fast pace that it's sometimes hard to take the time to slow down and assess. But I think that's one thing we're really good at, is like the car ride home from every video. What went well? What could I have done better? What did we learn? Like, I think we're always analyzing what we did. So I think that mindset is always going to take us to the next level. Let's see here. Any thoughts on the New York trip, or any thoughts on just things that have come up in life that we're thinking about now?
I mean, I think it was a very, very successful trip. I feel like we hit everything we wanted to hit. And I mean, like when we were with the drill rappers, it was a little slow, but I think besides that, it was an amazing trip. 10 out of 10.
Yeah, it feels good to just really execute, because there is a lot that can go wrong. Like, I know I really start to feel relaxed, like, towards the end of the trip. Like, as I know, like, okay, we already have this in the bag. Like, because at the beginning, it's like, okay, like, is this guy going to show up? Is this guy legit? Are we going to make it on time? Do we have enough time to get the story? Did we do enough prep work to make this right? But it did feel like, man, like, I'm very proud of the pace that we move at. Like, I think, like, behind the scenes, or no, if you're just watching the video, it seemed like, I think even Trax commented on it, like, it just seemed like, oh, it's so easy, or it's just, but there's so much effort and work and time, and like 15-hour days, 14-hour days. We've had days that feel like 22-hour days. Like, I know in Murder Creek, when we had to travel and do all the stuff we did. And so very pleased, very happy, feel very lucky. Like, the fact that we get to do this as our jobs, thanks to you at home, because if no one watches and no one cares, we don't keep doing this.
Definitely.
Very true.
Yeah, and for the trip as well, like, it felt like when we were saying, the bottom tier video of this trip was probably like a middle tier video of last trip. And so we're just, climbing those stairs each and every time, and just really quickly iterating and getting better. Like, I feel like that's the most fun part.
And I feel like the content that you're making it's kind of timeless, and it seems like it's kind of starting to become a trend almost. Like, everybody else, like you used to do pranks. Like, people, like, Nelk doesn't even do pranks anymore. They just did like a travel video, like exactly like what we do. So I think, like, it's going to start becoming a trend, and people just want to see other cool places, and you're showing them that, but also going deeper by, interviewing the people there, not just visiting like you're on like a vacation. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Being a traveler rather than like a tourist, more or less.
Yes, exactly.
Well, folks, this has been the New York behind the scenes summary. The next time you'll see us, we'll be getting home from Phoenix, Arizona, where I'm not going to even say out loud some of the things we're doing until it happens, because it's kind of, I'll give you one little taster, which is we'll be talking to a mafia hitman responsible for 19 hits, also responsible for helping put John Gotti, one of the biggest bosses in crime family history, behind bars. And that's just a taste of what we're getting into. So next time we see you, hopefully we'll be in sunny Phoenix. And any final thoughts?
Subscribe.
See you guys soon. Peace.